The attacks by Islamic extremists on the World Trade Center and trains and buses in Madrid and London challenged the West. How were we to react to an invisible enemy driven by religious fanaticism and the desire to destroy the West, and to replace it with a fundamentalist Islamic society based on the Quran and Sharia law? And how did it come to this? This story follows in the footsteps of Al-Qaeda, going all the way back to Egypt in the 1940s, when the struggle between the modern Western world and radical Islam began to accelerate. It was the start of a movement that was to spread to Saudi Arabia, Afghanistan and the rest of the Middle East, and finally, almost worldwide. The Holy War went global. In Egypt in 1948, a devoted Muslim functionary from the Ministry of Education by the name of Sayyid Qutb went on a study tour of the USA. He can hardly have imagined that he was to become one of the most important ideologists of a radical Islam terror movement known as Al-Qaeda. But as he crossed the Atlantic, he did know that his encounter with the USA might prove a major challenge.
You can sense, even before he got to America, the crisis of identity that this man was going through. When he was on the ship headed towards New York Harbor from Alexandria, Egypt, he made a vow to himself. He was in his room and he said, will I be a good Muslim? Or will I submit to the kind of lustfulness of Americans and give myself over to this kind of adventure? And he resolved that he was going to be a good Muslim, which meant that he would be strict, that he would be pure. And he went to a little town called Greeley, Colorado, a very religious city. You know, there were churches on every block. You would think that this would have been the perfect place for a man like him. And yet he was, for one thing, deeply threatened by the sexuality of these farm and ranch girls who populated the campus.
Sayyid Qutb reported several times on his sojourn in the corrupt USA. The dance hall convulsed to the tunes on the gramophone and was full of bouncing feet and seductive legs. Arms circled waists, lips met lips, chests met chests, and the atmosphere was full of passion.
This is a man who's a confirmed bachelor, and probably an embittered bachelor, because apparently he had an unhappy love affair. So he was profoundly affected emotionally on a personal plane by what he saw as the casual sexuality of American society.
To Sayyid Qutb, the USA was also a country devoid of spirituality and grace. I stayed there 6 months and never did I see a person or a family actually enjoying themselves. The most important thing for these people is the tending of their gardens, much in the same way a merchant spends time organizing his store or a factory owner his factory. There's nothing behind this activity in the way of beauty or artistic taste. It's the machinery of organization and arrangement, devoid of spirituality and aesthetic enjoyment.
Obviously, he saw one kind of America, and to him it was materialistic. The people were only interested in consumerism, in sexuality. That's the America he saw.
When Sayyid Qutb returned to Egypt in 1948, he observed the influence of the Western way of life there with growing concern. This is the story of enjoyment, the story of the newest, most modern companies in the Middle East, the story of well-being by the blue sea in the summer. the story of young people having fun at the seaside. In their fun and games, they have just one thing on their minds. A thing that is the cause of the new well-being in the Middle East. This is the little thing that has caused their well-being. Coca-Cola. Sayyid Qutb decided to join the Muslim Brotherhood, a movement founded in 1928, a few years after Egypt gained its independence from Great Britain. Despite the impressive cultural history of Egypt, the colonials had left major traces.
The colonial experience, which was an experience of colonizing other people, exploiting the resources of the colonized, under the claim of the white man's burden, in order to bring this wonderful, nearly existential, magical gift called modernity, development, to these societies. And in the process of doing so, the colonizer pretty much systematically destroyed traditional societies with their systems of knowledge, systems of authority, systems of learning, systems of production. And as they returned back to searching for their own identity, the only thing they found in their background, pre-colonialism, is some religious identity.
The Muslim Brotherhood became a social religious movement with this motto: Allah is our objective, the Quran is our constitution, the Prophet is our leader, jihad is our way, and death for the sake of Allah is the highest of our aspirations. The founder of the Muslim Brotherhood, just 22-year-old Hassan al-Banna, quickly developed the movement into an influential organization in Egyptian society.
Hassan al-Banna had actually read philosophers who talked about the secularism of the West and said that we have a serious problem, and that is by divorcing religion we've dismantled what could hold the fabric of society. In the beginning, it is a reform movement. It calls Muslims to be very rational, very modern, very developed, but be very proud of their religion and insistent on their religious values.
By the end of the 1930s, the Muslim Brotherhood was a powerful movement with branches throughout Egypt. And when Sayyid Qutb joined, it had more than 500,000 members. The Brotherhood took on King Farouk, the Western-minded, highly unpopular ruler.
King Farouk was corrupt. He was feckless. He was Turkish. He wasn't even Egyptian. He rode around town in one of 300 red cars that he owned. He was the only person in Egypt allowed to have a red car. And whenever he'd see a pretty girl, he would essentially summon her to his bed. Egyptians hated him.
An international event took place that was to have a major impact on the radicalization of the Muslim Brotherhood, the foundation of the State of Israel in 1948. The ensuing war between Israel's Arab neighbors saw the participation of thousands of members of the Brotherhood. It was now that the movement took up arms. King Farouk watched the growing confidence and popularity of the Brotherhood with increasing alarm, and in December 1948 he proscribed it. Just 3 weeks later, a member of the Brotherhood attacked King Farouk's prime minister, and Farouk retaliated. In February 1949, his secret service murdered Hassan al-Banna, the head of the organization.